Let's open our Bibles. We will be in 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel chapter 3. Right? We'll be going from verse 17 down, right, to verse 30. Okay, it's a rather long chapter, so we're going to have to break this up in parts. All right, so 2 Samuel chapter 3. And now last week we looked at what Abner had done, and he had kind of been growing and accumulating and consolidating power, albeit in the name of Ishbosheth and for the 11 tribes of Israel. But he decided he would help himself to Saul's concubine, right, Rizpah, and so there was this accusation by Ishbosheth, concerning what he had done, how he had acted very presumptuously. And so this resulted in an angry reaction from Abner. And he avowed that, it's the equivalent of "so help me God," right? I'm going to turn this kingdom, right, over to David instead, who is the who ought to be the rightful king, as God had already intended and laid out and anointed even in his plan. So this led to Ishbosheth's fear, because there was nothing Ishbosheth could do, right? Because Abner basically was holding all the cards, right? He could make him king. He could also take him down anytime. And so this led to Abner making contact with David, right? And then with the hope of forging an alliance, right? Some form of alliance, and there was a deal that was proposed that that Abner would swing the vote, right, influence the other 11 tribes, so that they would now stand in support of David instead of Ishbosheth. Okay, now it stands to reason, in exchange for that, right, that Abner would now secure a place and position, right, in the new government, right, under David. And David said, "Okay, I'm willing to. I'm open to this on one condition. All right, you bring back my wife." Okay, his wife Michal, who was the daughter of Saul, right, who was rightfully David's wife, who was given away to somebody else. Now, he told Abner, "You bring her back to me, otherwise there's no deal. All right, we're not talking, okay, unless this happens." Now, when you look at the whole matter, it may not be a surprise that David had asked. Okay, now he had asked for Michal, not just because she's his wife, but remember, she is a princess, right? The daughter of a king. And now, in this chapter, what do you see? There are two women here, right, who are somehow related to the king. One was Rizpah, his King Saul's concubine, and then the other one's Michal. Now, one of the things that David will have to do, all right, now, because this has to do with him ruling, and there's the whole politics of this thing. Okay, anyone who somehow has a link, right, or who possesses, let's say, Rizpah or Michal, could make a claim for the throne. All right, Abner acted in that way and was rebuked by Ishbosheth. Now, David is also securing the return of his wife to make sure that nobody else would be able to make that kind of claim, and so that any of Michal's children, all right, would firstly not be able to. Okay, if they are going to have a claim to the throne, they are going to have to be David's descendants, not anybody else's. Okay, so we see, David secured her return, all right, and So she goes back to him, and then now what happens? Okay, we come to where we are today, all right? And okay, now everything that David, Abner, and others in the 11 tribes, now they have been working towards a plan for unification. All right? And what's happened now is we see instead the failure, okay, at achieving this unification. Now, as we consider this, we must consider one thing. Okay, unification and unity has to be something that God forges, that God creates, rather than man. Now, man has to, on our part, we have to be willing, we have to agree, right, to allow God to work. Okay, but realize there is a difference between a man-made unity and one that is forged by God. Okay, so here what happens is this. There is an appeal for unity, all right, to come under David in verse 17 to verse 19. Look at what Abner says. And Abner had communication with the elders of Israel, saying, Ye sought for David in times past to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord had spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people, Israel, out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of all their enemies. And Abner spake also in the ears of Benjamin. And Abner went also to speak in the ears of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel and all that seemed good to the house of Benjamin. Now, you can see here in these 3 verses, all right, Abner now plays the role of diplomat. Okay? And it's not an easy task because as a diplomat, a lot of times you're bouncing in between 2 or more parties. All right? Pushing things a little, say, okay, what about this? If we do this, are you agreeable to this? All right? Then they say, okay, I think we might consider, but I have this concern. Okay? Now it goes back to B and this is, okay, now they have this concern. If you're willing to accede to this, then we can have, this first part. Are you agreeable? Then say, yes, but what about this thing? And then this gets going back and forth. Now, Abner is playing that role. All right? He's going back and forth between the elders of Israel and David. Okay? It can be said, well, why can't they all just get together and just meet, right? And save all this trouble? Yes, that's possible. But on the other hand, it may not always be easy to do it that way. All right? Simply because there are things that are not possible when someone is there in front of everybody else. They're put on the spot, and because of that, in fact, it may be less latitude, right? Less room to move, and it may be harder to actually come to an agreement. So although this is going back and forth, and here you're not, most likely what's happening is it's not just one big plan laid out for everyone, because that would have been too much to swallow. So, Abner, whoever plays this role, will have to just advance, push this one thing first, right? See if they'll bite. If they're okay, then we'll talk about another thing. We'll add one more thing, and then we'll see, and we'll progressively go on. And so here he mentions to them, right, that they had sought for David in times past to be king. Okay, so, and then, so he's saying, basically he points out, right, in the past, this is what you would have sought. So now let's do it, right? Let's not drag our feet, right? Verse 18. And right, this is, in addition, it says, God had already spoken of David. Right, it says, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of all their enemies. Right? So, now, so what Abner is trying to tell the elders of Israel is this: hey, look, it's time to quit dragging our feet over this matter. You know where God stands on this. And thing that we need to do is to get behind God's plan rather than clinging on and holding on to our plan and our way. Now, remember, in contrast, Saul was the people's choice. Right? During the time of Samuel, right, he met with the approval of all the people. He was the popular choice, but it has now met with utter failure. And Abner is making the appeal, right? Look, don't hang on to the past. And in particular, I think it's one thing that we as a people need to always be mindful of. Whatever setbacks or whatever issues now, don't get hung up and get to cling on to something. Especially, look, if we made a mistake, we made a mistake. We move on. All right, if we didn't do the right thing, then let's start doing the right thing. Okay? But there's no necessity to hold on to the past. And here, Saul and his legacy, it's over. Okay, sadly, some churches don't get it. They keep looking back onto the past as if, okay, and I would say this, as if God is dead, because what we need to be looking at is what God is doing now and what He can do moving forward, rather than to keep clinging on to the so-called good old days. All right, because unless God is dead, there are many more future, right, good days and years ahead. But the question is, can people see it? And Abner is making an appeal to all of them, right? In particular, he spoke to Benjamin, all right, and then he went back to David again, and then you notice it says all that seemed good to Israel and all that seemed good to the house of Benjamin. So it looked like Benjamin in particular had their own specific concerns. Now, it stands to reason because, remember, King Saul came from the tribe of Benjamin. So the tribe of Benjamin has their own particular concerns. All right? And so in this whole process of diplomacy, there was a need to go back and forth. Now, look at the choice of God. Now, remember, Abner in particular, notice he homed in on Benjamin. Why? Because they are going to be very influential, right, in the outcome. In this whole matter of uniting all the tribes, right, under David, right, Benjamin holds many of the cards. And yet, the irony is this: Benjamin happens to be the smallest tribe, right? It's the smallest tribe of all, but they hold the cards and they could pivot this thing, right? Everything could swing either for the better or for the worse, depending on how Benjamin would respond. Now, as I mentioned, Abner pointed out, right? David was God's choice. Now look at 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 12. Here, Samuel was at the house of Jesse, right, to anoint the new king. Notice, and he sent and brought him in. Now, he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." So God had spoken to Samuel, right, as to who would be the choice, who to anoint. Now, if you turn to chapter 13, verse 14, right, prior to chapter 16, now God had told Saul he was going to take the kingdom away from him. Chapter 13, verse 14, "But now thy kingdom shall not continue, for the Lord had sought him a man after his own heart. And the Lord had commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee." And so you see here that Saul paid the price for disobedience, right, in trying to override God. And, God had told him, your kingdom will not continue. Look at chapter 15, verse 28. And Samuel said unto him, the Lord had rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and had given it to a neighbor of thine that is better than thou. All right, so God told Saul, I'm looking for a better king. Right, and it was to point out, he may be the people's choice. Right, he was head and shoulders taller than anybody else, impressive looking in terms of his stature and all that. Right, David, on the other hand, is not very fancy by anyone. All right, you have to remember, David is not someone at this point in time that would impress anyone. Right, in the eyes of many, he's just a kid. Right, shepherd. This guy is. His work experience basically was what? Dealing with sheep. Okay? What does he know? And yet, he is God's choice. Now, realize when God chooses us for a task, don't go into a long debate with God. Who? Me? Are you sure that maybe did you get the wrong person or whatever, and so on and so forth? Because when God chooses, he knows, trust one thing, he knows what he's doing. And if he's going to pick you and I, then, trust one thing, he did not make a mistake. All right? Now, David was the choice, not Saul. And 2 Samuel chapter 3, look at verse 9 to 10. So do God to Abner and more also, except as the Lord had sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. Okay? And so the earlier part of this chapter, Abner points out, right, I'm going to do this, right? Just as God has sworn to David, I will do so also to him. And at that point, Abner announced here that he was defecting. Okay, now, so here, Abner plays his role and he goes back and forth. And then now he seeks an audience with David, right? He meets with David to update him about the plan and about what's going on and the progress in the peace talks and the unification talks. All right, look at verse 20 and 21. So Abner came to David to Hebron, and 20 men with him. All right, now you see Abner moves back and forth. Now he goes to see David in Hebron, and he doesn't bring a lot of protection. All right, just 20 men. Why? Because Abner has already secured, right, in terms of his working relationship with David. Now, they are at peace with each other. Right, so he doesn't need to bring a big armed force and all that. Okay, just 20 men to accompany him, and notice, and David made Abner and the men that were with him a feast. Now, you don't make a feast with someone who is your enemy. Right? They ate together, they talked. Right, verse 21, and Abner said unto David, I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel unto my lord the king, that they may make a league with thee, and that thou mayest reign over all that thine heart desireth. Right? And at this point, you see, David gives his blessings, and David sent Abner away, and notice, and he went away in peace. All right? So Abner goes, right, he comes back and forth, goes to David. Now, throughout all this, the men, right, under David would have seen Abner coming back and forth. All right, he passes through the gates of the city with just 20 men. They are not under arrest or anything like that. Abner is free to come and go to seek, right, an audience with David. He has access to David, right, and those who are in the court who have heard David give express permission to Abner, right, concerning his plan to gather all Israel. They will know that Abner was involved in trying to bring unification rather than to divide the kingdom. Okay, but now all this will be clear and apparent to the people directly under David. But apparently, it seems, except with the exception of Joab, right, who has his own idea. Now, here we see in verse 22 the alarm over David's deal. Okay, and behold, the servants of David and Joab came from pursuing a troop and brought in a great spoil with them. Right, so they basically went out. They chased after, they attacked some, whoever it may be, and then they brought back the loot and all that. It says, but Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. Okay, when Joab and all the host that was with him would come, they told Joab. All right, so Joab knows what's going on. Why? Because he was informed, by the servants of David, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he had sent him away. He is gone in peace. Now, that ought to have settled the matter already. Okay, if Joab knows, all right, Abner came, all right, the king has no problem with Abner. All right, he came in peace, he sent him away. Now, he's sent away on an assignment. But that was not good enough for Joab. Now, and you have to look at this and ask ourselves some hard questions like, what kind of leader is Joab? And what kind of loyalty and service does Joab offer to David? All right, now remember, David is his uncle. Okay, is Joab's uncle. Okay, the son of David's daughter, son of David's sister. But look at the way he comes to David. Right, verse 24. Then Joab came to the king and said, what hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone? Now, I don't know about you. Some of us at this point would have said, Joab, are you done? All right, Joab, who are you? Joab, maybe you need to remember who's the king, because it isn't you. All right, because Joab comes to David, and if you listen to the line of questioning, right, it's as if David reports to Joab. Okay, and so I'm pointing out here something about the heart of Joab and the kind of person that he is. And all these are, I would point out, I think, warning signs. All right, that as far as the men who are the trusted leaders of David, right, Joab is one of the loose cannons. All right, and is likely to cause a lot more trouble down the road if this is not handled properly. All right, he comes to David now. Even though David is the king, right? Even though Joab is under subjection and submission to the king, and yet it looks like it's the other way around. All right, he's asking, look, it's like, who are you to ask the king all these things? All right, who is Joab to tell David what to do? All right, now sadly, over the years, I've had to tell certain people that, hey, look, we work together, we're part of the team, wherever there is a chain of authority, but stop acting like I report to you. All right, and while even the pastor of a church is accountable, or whatever, there is a difference between in terms of how you deal with him, how you treat him. Now, here Joab does this, right? And then he's telling David, look, here's what I think, right? It says, look at verse 25. Thou knowest Abner the son of Ner, that he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. So when you look at verse 25, what do we see? It is obvious that Joab doesn't trust Abner. All right? He doesn't trust Abner at all. Very likely, he has also allowed, right, the bad blood, All right, the fact that Abner was the one that killed Joab's youngest brother, all right, to influence how he looks, to color the way he looks at things. All right, that's why when we deal with things, with matters, it's also important for us to realize there is a need for us to sometimes to separate out the issues instead of just kind of conflating and combining everything together. Okay, here we see he there's some alarm over this thing. All right. In all these passages, right, what do we see? Abner is now serving David, all right, and is on assignment. He's taking instructions from David, his king. And I think it's important for us to realize now, why did David do this? David is choosing to trust Abner. All right? He's choosing to trust Abner. Otherwise, he would not have anything to do with him. I've said this many times personally. If I don't trust someone, I don't want to have anything to do with them. Period. I don't even want to be in the same room. All right? But here, David is choosing why? Because David is choosing peace. He's choosing that in order for David, right, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and the other 10 tribes to come together and to work, they have to choose to trust. They have to choose to work together. Okay? It is a choice. But what you see in verse 24 is Abner is a leader who doesn't operate on the principle of trust. He's not prepared to trust anyone. Okay? The way he questions David tells you one thing. He doesn't trust David. He's questioning David's wisdom, right? Questioning his actions, his leadership. Now, what there is, this undermines David. Okay, it's unacceptable, unbecoming of anyone who is in a position of leadership under someone. All right, and because of Joab's mistrust of Abner, now immediately you look at verse 25, right? Suspicion will impute evil intentions, even if there is no cause for that. Right? And because now, up to this point, under the new administration with David now ascending to the throne as king, now Joab is in a very, very powerful position. He's like the right-hand man of David. Okay? And you can see the beginnings of him behaving, presumptuously. But now, remember one thing. Realize this, human beings are not immune. Right? Power has the capacity to corrupt. Why? Not because of power in and of itself. It's going to amplify whatever is already inside the person. All right? And if this person has the capacity to be like that, the power, and especially a lot of power, a lot of money is going to bring that out in them. Now, we saw that even in Abner. Okay? And that's why it's not easy, because the higher levels of leadership really require men who are very, very sound and solid and stable in character, all right? And in particular, in their spirituality. Now, we're going to see what the assassination of Abner. Look at verse 26 and 27. And Joab was come out from David, and he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him again from the well of Sirah. But David knew it not. Now, what happens? So Joab goes out, covert action, right? He does this thing behind David's back. And sadly, the problem is this: how many times have we seen this kind of thing happen in churches? It's not just one or two churches or whatever. It happens far too often. Right? And Joab goes out behind David's back, right, to do this action, right? Again, under the with deception, right? Stealthily, right? Covertly, and in a New Testament church, I would remind everyone, right? There is no place for that kind of thing. Right, verse 27, and when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly. So it's like, hey, come, I got something to tell you. All right, it says, let's have a private conversation because there's something important I need to tell. And what happens? It says, and smote him there under the fifth rib, that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. So the scriptures records for us, right, the motive for killing Abner, right? This is revenge, right? He killed Asahel. Now, but here's the thing. When you look at the Ten Commandments, right, and it tells us, thou shalt not kill. Now, there is a very big difference between, right, killing someone and murder. And in the law of Moses, the commandment forbids specifically murder. Okay, it's a premeditated act. All right, and this has nothing to do with what happens in a war. Okay, now this is not, they were not at war. Right, Abner was at peace with David and vice versa. But here now, Joab, under the pretense of wanting to speak to him, right, concerning, who knows, right, some administrative matter or whatever, basically, whatever, covertly shoves a knife, right, puts it right under his fifth rib, kills him there, okay, and assassinates him. Now, one motive here is, as the scripture states, right, is revenge. Okay, but remember, when they were fighting, what did Abner do? Abner ended up, right, despite multiple warnings that were not heeded by Asahel, right, Abner ended up having to kill Asahel. Why? Out of self-defense. Right, what does Joab do? He commits murder instead. Right, this is an ambush. Okay, now none of this is, so if you want to look at this, right, realize Joab's actions are very far from honorable. Right, this is cold-blooded murder. Okay, this is treachery. And then consider the other possibility. With Abner playing such an important role in reuniting the whole nation, right? Now, it's very likely that Abner could become the second in command, not Joab. And so what does Joab do? He sees to it, right, that he takes out any possible competition, right? Anyone that could jeopardize his role, okay, so that he remains as number two. Right? All possible rivals are taken out. Okay? That's the kind of leader that Joab is. Okay? He will not tolerate any challenges. Right? No one who could be better than him. And so he ensures that he's killed. Right? Now, in doing so, what happens? Look at Joab's handling of the matter. Joab doesn't trust David to handle things properly. So he takes things into his own hands, all right, through covert action. All right, Joab undermined David's authority and leadership in the process. Okay, and years, long years ago, I've seen someone on staff do that to my own pastor. Okay, members do that to pastors all the time. All right? Because all this reeks of mistrust. And that's why they have to take things into our own hands. Now, let's kind of step back a bit because we do this. All of us have done this before in some way or other. What do? We jump in because we don't trust God to do the job. All right, we don't trust God to take care of things, so we decide it's time for us to take things into our own hands. All right, and Abraham and Sarah did that. There were others in the scriptures that did that. And we don't realize that when we do this, right, there is a stinging accusation against God that you cannot be trusted. Right? You are unreliable. And I don't care what promises you made. The best thing that I can do is to take things into my own hands because I need to protect my own interests, because I cannot trust you to protect my interests. And this is not new because, all right, because this was exactly the kind of thing that the serpent told Eve, that, that in the day that thou eatest thereof, right, of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, it says, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. You can decide for yourself. All right, it says, God doesn't want you to know that this can happen. Okay? Why? Because that's how Satan operates. Right? By partitioning things, right? Playing one against the other and all that. And here, okay, Joab has been doing this. Now, look at what the devil has to say, because what the scripture says about this kind of behavior. Right? Proverbs 26, right? Look at verse 24 to 28. He that hateth dissembleth with his lips. All right, someone who hates, right, to dissemble. It says, and lay up deceit within him. Now, when you dissemble, you say one thing, you do another. All right, and or maybe I say something with the, now, you see this in an act of war. Example, recently, what was it? Israel made this move that they mobilized a lot of their armor towards the border. It looked as if they were preparing for a massive land invasion, crossing over into Palestine. Right? What happens? All the Hamas terrorists, they went underground, assembled, right, concentrated in the tunnels for safety. And instead, what happens was, in driving them into because they did that, this was perfect, because, right, what the Israeli Defense Forces did, they targeted the tunnels and destroyed the tunnels, killing a lot of terrorists. Okay? Here, it says, he that hateth dissembleth with his lips, right, and layeth up deceit within him. That when he speaketh fair, believe him not. Right? So he says one thing, okay, don't believe him. It says, for there are 7 abominations in his heart, right, whose hatred is covered by deceit. His wickedness shall be shown before the whole congregation. Right? Whoso diggeth. Now, then it says, this points out, all right, at some point it says such a wicked person, right, will be exposed. That's why it says his wickedness shall be showed before the whole congregation. Now it says, whoso diggeth a pit shall fall therein. You see, the traps will backfire. You dig a pit, you fall in it instead. All right. Now, Hamas has been launching a lot of rockets. A certain percentage of them drop back because of malfunction. They drop back on their own people, killing their own people. Yeah, it's happening in Israel, in Palestine right now. It says that he that rolleth a stone, right, say it will return unto him. All right. Now, this description, right, it's the kind of thing that I grew up watching in the cartoons. Wild E. Coyote, he's trying to, kill the roadrunner. He rolls a stone, now the thing backfires, it rolls back on him. Right? He digs a pit, he ends up falling in it. It says, a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. And so we need to be very careful of people like that. Notice, people who, now, over and over again, actually in the scriptures, we are warned about people who make fair speeches. Wait, I thought people who sound nice and say nice things, we ought to trust them, right? We're warned about people who do that. All right? Is it flattery? Is it someone like that, lying, is going to work ruin? Okay, it will be the cause of destruction. Now look at Proverbs 27, verse 4 to 6. Wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? Verse 5. Notice, open rebuke is better than secret love. All right, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. All right, think about this. Open rebuke is better than secret love. Why? You contrast it to today, what people say, you said that, all right, I didn't like that, I'm offended. All right, haters are going to hate. Oh, you're just a hater. You say this, you say this kind of thing because you don't like me. You know what? It says here, open rebuke is better than secret love. All right, you can measure how close your relationship is with someone. All right, depending on one thing. Are you able to tell the other person unpleasant truths? Now, it says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And sometimes, a good friend, they're going to say things not to hurt you, but, it is that the truth is there for your sake. Now, you're not going to like what was said, but it is needful. This is, in contrast, the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. We're warned about that. And yet, what do we see? What usually happens in our interaction, all right, especially among Christians, right? Because what's going on here is we've been corrupted, right, by the world's culture, and we shove the scriptures aside. We want to hear flattering words. We want to hear smooth words. We want to hear all that kind of stuff instead of what? The faithful, loving rebuke, let's say, from a friend. Okay, now obviously, if someone is using these verses, misusing that as an excuse to wound other people, something's wrong with that person. All right? But here, you notice, beware. We're actually to beware of this. Right? Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 24. Cursed be he that smiteth his neighbor secretly, and all the people shall say, Amen. Okay? Now, this tells you something about what Joab did. All right? And the kind of punishment that is deserving. Okay? Now, Proverbs 1, verse 10 and 11 tells us, My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, Come with us, let us wait for blood, let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. All right? We're told here what? If sinners entice us, it says, say no. Why? If they say, Come with us, all right, let's lay wait for blood. Right? No, let's ambush someone, all right, and then hurt them, to the point we draw blood or even kill them. It says, let us lurk privily. All right, let's lurk in the darkness where we cannot be seen, wait for the innocent, and then to afflict them. Now, all these things, you're going to see that we are warned, and then it's against God's laws. And all these things that Joab is doing, all right, is worthy, actually, of punishment. Okay? Now, as we ponder about these things, I think we should wrap up here. But as we ponder about these things, ask ourselves this, all right? Because there is a question here. Now, do the ends justify the means? All right? Just because, okay, Abner and David now have a deal. Now, it looks like it may threaten Joab's position. Does it justify Joab committing murder? Right? Do we do what we do just to get what we want? Okay. And then you notice one thing, because of the this presumptuous behavior of Joab, right, in taking things into his own hand, right, in doing so, what Joab did was to undermine David. Right, never mind that David has a plan, right, and together with Abner they worked it out. There was a plan for reunification, to bring the kingdom together and all that. What did they do? Joab just basically did whatever he needs to do, right, because he has his own agenda. Okay, now then realize this. In doing all that, right, now, do you think that David can rely on someone like Joab? Right? Can he be trusted? Right? Can you trust someone, an important task to someone, when you have no idea what they're going to do? All right, he is, in other words, unpredictable. Right? And related to that, that makes him unreliable. Because somewhere along the way, it's possible he could just jeopardize everything by injecting his very own agenda. Okay, and now this totally jeopardizes the entire unification plan. Okay, now this is looking at it from one level. Now we step back and we look at it from a different level. Realize this: man can make their plans and move their agenda in terms of bringing things together. Now God is going to have his own plan and own timing. All right, there will come a time where the kingdom will be united under David, but not today. Not under these circumstances. Okay? And sometimes realize we may be working in the direction that God is leading us, but our plans are not what he wants. And there can be a delay as a result. And what you and I have to do is we have to have the wisdom and discernment, right, to know that sometimes that, hey, the answer is not now. Let's wait. Right? Let's wait upon the Lord. Right? He knows the timing. Right? Just as right now, we've been praying about certain things. Right? That certain things to happen, but there is a different timing for all this, and just because it doesn't fit our timing and our to our satisfaction according to our agenda, doesn't mean, right? It doesn't mean that God's not interested. Right? It just means that we're just gonna have to be patient. We'll wait a little longer. Right? We just keep watching. Right? That's why one of the things that for the New Testament saints to do is this thing of watching and waiting. Okay? Why? Because if you and I are watching and waiting and anticipating, we will also, when the time comes, we will be able to recognize the time has come. Right? It's time now to act. But until then, we watch and wait. We continue to pray. We continue to trust that God knows the timing. He knows what he's doing, even if it's not to our liking. Okay? And so may God give us wisdom, right? And let us not be like men who are presumptuous, people who will take things into our own hands, but rather let's trust God that he knows where and when. But let's continue to pray, right? Ask for wisdom for what we need to do, when to make the move, how to recognize, right, the time has come to actually do something, right? And not to be presumptuous or impatient, but to trust the Lord, right? Because every time we take things to our own hands, we are dissatisfied with that. It is basically an accusation against God that we don't like the way He does things. We think we can do better, so we are taking over. Right? Let's be yielded, surrendered, right? Trusting. We trust that God knows what He's doing, even if we don't. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you.